Today's podcast of Hellbent for Horror is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/Hellbent for Horror. Audible has over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Hi, and welcome to Hellbent for Horror, a podcast devoted to all things related to horror. I'm S.A. Bradley, and I'm a lifelong movie lover, but my heart belongs to horror. My biggest thrill, however, is getting to talk to people about this stuff. I really want to start conversations with you. So, what scares you? What really scares you? It's a question I get asked a lot. I rarely have a good answer. I'm afraid of the standard things everybody's afraid of, like dying, disfigurement, dying alone, horrible disease, torture. I'm just a regular guy. But every so often I have an experience watching a movie or reading a book that snaps me to attention. It reminds me that there's an answer that I've kept hidden, even to myself, for a long time. This happened to me recently. I was doing a podcast about makeup effect artists, and I went back to The Exorcist to do some research. As you might suspect, I've seen the movie a few times. And when you go back to a movie looking at it from a technical angle, you're detached from it. So it was pretty academic viewing. However, the next day, one of my horror movie friends recommended another movie to me. He's one of the guys that if he recommends something, I watch it. He recommended Lovely Molly, a 2011 horror film directed by Eduardo Sanchez, who directed the Blair Witch Project. Now, I'm a strong supporter of Blair Witch, but I hadn't watched this movie by Sanchez. As a completist, that's pretty rare. Now, the real reason I didn't watch Lovely Molly was because it was a demonic possession movie, because they usually suck. After watching The Exorcist again, I realized why. Most of these possession films follow the template of The Exorcist, and they all box themselves in, literally. The big climax is the exorcism, and in my opinion, it's just not scary. The movie shrinks into one static location. It's either a bedroom, or a barn, or a basement. And the possessed person is tied up to a bed or a chair, and everybody else in the room looks scared and speaks really loudly. There's just no room for any real surprises. It's a slow death of my interest until the power of Christ finally compels somebody. But Lovely Molly was different. It genuinely creeped me out, as only a few films of this style have. Because Eduardo Sanchez knows what I know, that the scariest thing about the idea of demons actually roaming the earth is the hunt, the stalking, the seduction, the terrorizing. When something you can't see or stop sets its sights on you, and it toys with you, just to watch you choke on your fear. Now, I don't believe in demons, or Satan. Seriously, I don't. Or shall I say, my conscious self doesn't believe in demons. But there's this little ball of old fear sunk deep in my unconscious that does believe. It's an old tape recording put there by other people when I was a small child, and no matter what I learn or experience, I just can't seem to erase that tape. So that's my trigger. Demons. A demonic possession movie can really scare me if it's done right. It can make me outside of my comfort zone scared. So when I realized I wanted to talk about my trigger around demons, I decided to poll my listeners on what movies they could name where the possessed person was a male. I got a huge amount of responses, and many I'd never expect. Serpent and the Rainbow, the Evil Dead movies, The Believers, Night of the Demons and its sequel, Prince of Darkness, Lamberto Bava's Demons. Now here's the funny thing. Even with the word demon in the title of some of these movies, none of those movies crossed my mind. I see them more as monster movies. I realized that I have a very different relationship and definition of demons and demonic possession than most people do. And this definition was put in me at an early age and has never really left me. So, when I was a child, my family joined a fundamentalist religion. They had a lot of intense beliefs, but there's one that is pertinent to this conversation. They believed completely that demons walk the earth, literally, and they were all around us. They were invisible, but they could take human form to terrify you or trick you. They never slept, and they were indestructible. And all they wanted to do was destroy you, especially if you were a faithful person of God. So we were given a figurative armor to wear right out of the book of Ephesians: a belt of truth, a breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, a helmet of salvation, and a sword of the Spirit. This figurative armor would repel the demons like deep woods off would do to mosquitoes. I'm sure that this was supposed to comfort me as a boy, but it didn't. What if I drop the sword? What if the helmet comes off while I sleep? Now, I admit to being a nervous kid with an overactive imagination, but these are my memories. There was a whole lot going on in my life at that time. I didn't know it explicitly, but my parents were on the edge of a divorce. At the time, my mother wasn't coping well. She became more and more emotionally unstable as the marriage was falling apart, and honestly, she scared the hell out of me. She was not herself at that time. She even started to look different. My mom was the true believer of the religion in the house, and she believed the battle of good and evil was happening all around us, especially inside our home. And she wasn't alone. The whole demon thing was discussed in total grim seriousness among members of the congregation. I believe that zealots live in a horror movie of their own making. Looking back now, the people I heard the stories from were questionable in their own reliability, but as an 8-year-old, as far as I knew, this was all true. At that time, it was common for people to tell me that they had a close call with a demon. One churchgoer who became a family friend told me that one day he woke up in the morning feeling like he was being stared at. He opened his eyes and looked around the room. Sitting in a chair in his bedroom was an extremely old Asian man with no eyes. He said he felt something grab his chest, so he closed his eyes and prayed. When he opened them, there was nothing there. Prayer saved him. Or another story one of the church kids told me. He's walking to school in the rain, and he cuts through a playground. The kid sees a little man in a raincoat on the other side of the playground. When the little man sees the kid, he starts running towards him. Fast. Too fast for something that size. The boy can't run. It's almost on him, so he calls out to God, and the thing is gone. That one stuck with me for a while because every morning I had to walk past a playground to get to my elementary school. But the thing that really terrified me were the stories about the invisible ones. These were demons that could get into your house through objects. Let me explain. This religion believed that demons could attach themselves to objects, especially objects that were considered dangerous. The scariest story I was told was about a family of farmers who brought a Ouija board home thinking it was just a board game. They couldn't understand how to play with it, so they just put the board in a hallway closet. The mother was home alone during the day, and when she would pass the closet, she'd hear someone pleasantly call her name. Janet. At first, she didn't realize it was coming from the closet, but when she did, she opened up the door, and right there was the Ouija board. She threw it into a trash can at the top of the basement stairs. Later that night, one of the family members was pushed down the stairs by an unseen force. Doors started to slam on their own in the house. The family suddenly knew that they had left a demon into their home and they were under attack. The family called the church elders to come to the house. They came and they said a litany of prayers and removed the Ouija board from the house. Their answer was to take the Ouija board out into the yard and burn it. The flames got out of control and burned part of the barn, but the demon was gone. And no sooner than I hear this story, it happens to my family. So, here's some of the hysteria I dealt with as a kid. My father buys a chest of drawer set from a yard sale. Not 5 minutes after we get into the house, my mom is screaming. She's found a ceramic statue of praying hands in one of the drawers. Now this was considered a false idol in my parents' new religion and a perfect vessel for a demon to enter a house. Now, why was a set of praying hands a false idol? I have no idea. But this started a night of absolute terror for me. The church elders come to the house and they prayed in every room and they removed the praying hands like it was a bomb. And of course, they assured our family that we would be fine as long as we kept ourselves in God's armor and in prayer. You know, if you're good, you have nothing to worry about. But I didn't think I was good. My family was falling apart. And there were so many rules, so many ways to sin, so many things to be afraid of. It was about that time that I started to lose my grip on reality along with my mother. I would lay in bed at night and I was positive that I saw shadowy figures come off the wall and try to reach my bed, arms outstretched. But they would fall and disappear into the carpet before they got there, and I would hear things in the house. Now, I have no doubt it was plates settling in a dish rack or a draft going through the house, closing an open door. I mean, it was an old house. But I was so full of anxiety, I was sure it was something else. I felt like I was being watched. If I was alone in the house during the day, I wouldn't look in any mirrors. I was convinced I would see something behind me, something that was normally invisible, but it wanted me to see it right then, just to make me scream. The worst was being upstairs alone at night. I remember being in the bathtub one night. It was about a week after my father moved out. It was his visitation night. I could hear him and the echo of the television downstairs. And very slowly, the bathroom door just closes on its own. It's a summer evening. The window is open. A light wind moves the curtains. I know it's the wind. I know it's the wind. I know it's the wind. It is so quiet. Why am I getting more scared? I close my eyes and I say a prayer. It's not calming me down. When I open my eyes, I'm looking right at the window. I am positive there is something there, right outside the window, watching me. I need to call out. Dad? Silence. There's very few things scarier as a kid than when you call for your parent and there's silence. My voice echoes back to me off the porcelain of the tub. This time I shout. I hear my dad curse and make his way up the stairs. He opens the door and he looks at me. He's startled. For a moment, a little scared. How frightened did I look? Now, my father was just as devout in this new religion as my mother, but he could see what was happening. I was possessed by my mother's hysterics. My mother was getting support from other women from the church, but she was attracting other hysterics. It seemed like every day I would come home from school and see the women at the kitchen table winding each other up instead of calming each other down. Whenever I would mess up, and that was often, my mother would scream and make me kneel and pray for forgiveness to God right then and there. My father could see that this hysteria had gotten its hooks in me, and he said, "Son, stop it right now. Stop being a child." It was all he could do. Shock therapy. He must have felt helpless. I'd love to say that he snapped me out of it, but he didn't. I did learn to keep it quiet. I had a lot of very vivid nightmares for quite a while. It was a tough year. And just at the right time, the movie The Exorcist is released. All of a sudden, demon fever takes over the world. Now, you'd think that this might make things worse, but it didn't. Now, lots of people were talking about things I kept quiet. It was like how I felt about Halloween. It was my favorite holiday because once a year, all the kids believed monsters are real, just like I did. And then one day, just when things felt their darkest, I just realized the whole thing was bullshit. How I got to that point is a whole other long story. I will say that having your whole life turned upside down at an early age can toughen you up in some ways. It certainly made me question everything, and a lot of the things I was afraid of just didn't stand up to any scrutiny. One of the things that got me through the rough times was horror movies. My life was out of control, but I could survive being scared in horror films. When I watched horror movies, I faced all sorts of scary things and came out okay on the other side. Horror films made me feel brave. I felt stronger in mind. I even went to the library and checked out The Exorcist. Don't ask me how I got it past the librarian. The point is that I read a very scary book about something I thought was real, and demons didn't come and kill me. So I dove into movies about demons. I tend to embrace the things that scare me, and I got a lifelong love of all types of horror because of it. As I hit my teen years, my rational mind took over, and those chaotic years of my childhood got shoved down in the basement. And yet, that old tape would play every so often, and I'd get a shiver of raw fear at the oddest moments. Take when the Amityville Horror came out in 1979. I was sitting with a few friends, and we were talking about how much the whole thing was crap. One of my friends was making fun of the idea of Jody the pig. What is so scary about a pig? many jokes about Charlotte's Web. And then I got scared. I suddenly remembered a Bible passage where Jesus came upon a possessed man. Jesus asks the demon's name, and it replies, "I am Legion, for I am one of many." Jesus casts the demons into a herd of 2,000 pigs. The possessed animals run into a nearby lake and drown. I told this story to my friends, and then I said, what if not all the pigs drowned? Maybe one of them was Jody. This creeped out my friends, but it really scared me because that scripture just popped into my head. It was an association to a frightening time, and it took a few days to shake the visual image of a pig with red eyes. There have been a handful of movies that have recreated some of the fears that I had as a child. I give them all respect for getting me out of my comfort zone. But I'm also aware that other people may not see anything scary in these movies if they don't have some old superstition rattling around in their heads. My atheist friends laugh out loud at this stuff and look at me funny. But the movies still get me in the lizard brain. One was the infamous 1982 movie The Entity with Barbara Hershey. Now, by 1982, I was a hardcore horror junkie, and I was taking in a slasher film a week. I would go see any horror film sight unseen. And then I walked into The Entity. For those that don't know this film, it's based on true events about an unmarried mother who's attacked by an invisible entity. It beats and rapes her. Of course, nobody believes her. The movie may be flawed, but director Sidney J. Furie put together a few sequences that felt absolutely real to me. There's a scene where Barbara Hershey is in her bedroom at night. She's seated at her dresser, combing her hair in the mirror. She suddenly stops. She senses something. She's not sure what. The room is empty and quiet. And then she is slapped hard in the face by something she can't see. It draws blood. She is stunned, terrified. This is unreal. And then she's thrown across the room onto the bed. The invisible force smothers her with a pillow. And there's this sound that plays over the soundtrack, a throbbing, pounding noise that sounded a lot like the blood rushing through my head when I was a terrified kid. Another scene has Hershey walking through her home. She is obviously afraid of every shadow. She goes into her bedroom and turns on every light. She stays clothed and reads a book in the bed. And then an end table at the other end of the room shakes like something just bumped into it. And then the dresser in the center of the room shakes the same way. And then the end table next to her bed shakes. She jumps out of the room, screaming. The door slams behind her, but something is trying to break through. The door is barely staying on its hinges. There's another moment right out of an old nightmare that I had. She's walking across the kitchen, and she walks right into something invisible, and it knocks her down. Just to do it. Just to terrify. And then there's the bathroom scene. Hershey is in the bathtub with her eyes closed. It's dead silent in there. And then we see the bathroom door slowly close. She hears the door latch and her eyes open. And then the door to an adjoining room slams shut. For an excruciating amount of time, she is standing there, listening for anything. Terrified, trapped. And then the invisible force is upon her. This movie obviously goosed some of my old memories. Unfortunately, the movie runs out of steam long before it ends. It goes down an absurd scientific experiment route which killed any fear I had earlier. But when I got home, and it was dark in the house, and it was dead quiet, I got that fear that made me turn on all the lights. These moments always make me laugh afterwards. It's so silly. I don't believe in this stuff. And yet, there was this time I was recovering from knee surgery. I was staying over a friend's house, and when he would go to work, I'd rest my leg on the sofa and watch movies. I saw he had an old copy of The Exorcist on VHS, like from the first copies produced. Being a fan, I wanted to watch it and see if I could find the subliminal shots, frame by frame. See, when The Exorcist first came out, there were imperceptible subliminal images in the film. Then, during one performance, an audience member passed out and broke his jaw. He sued Warner Brothers, saying that the subliminal images made him faint. At the time, the use of those images came with some controversy. Nobody was sure of the impact that they actually had. So Warner Brothers settled out of court. So later prints of the film, as legend says, added additional frames to the subliminal images so they could be captured by the eye. Now, I was doing this experiment in the early 1980s. At that time, there were no resources that had stills of these now infamous images readily available as they are today. What these images looked like were a mystery to the average film viewer. So I started watching The Exorcist alone, looking for the telltale white flashes that you see around subliminal imagery. For those of you who haven't done this and are curious, start looking around the 45-minute mark. Father Karras is having a nightmare, and we see his nightmare. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Feel free to experience it for yourself. So I see the white flash, and I'm going frame by frame to see what's there. There are several odd images, and then there are a few black frames. And then pops up an image that's only 3 frames long. You'll know it when you find it. I see this image, and my jaw drops. It's like finding a forbidden idol. It feels dangerous to look at. And this image is staring out at me. I'm fascinated, and I'm a little creeped out by it. So I turn off the television, and I start reading. I hear the television click back on. The image is there again. I figure I double-click the remote and turned it back on by accident, so I turn it off. Click. I hear it turn back on. And there's the image. I feel the hairs on my neck going up. The house is deadly quiet. I grab my crutches and I get up. Enough of this. I'm going to turn off the television manually. As I hobble towards the television, it clicks off. I catch my breath. This is crazy. And then the television clicks back on. I leave the house. I'm going up and down the sidewalk on my crutches, trying to figure out why I'm so suddenly scared. There has to be a logical explanation. I don't believe in this stuff. And yet, of course, there was a logical explanation. The batteries for the remote were going, and the power was fluctuating on and off. My friend and I had a good laugh over this. Another movie that really scared me when I first saw it at a midnight screening was the original Paranormal Activity. Yes, I hear some of you groaning. I think the original's primal impact has been overshadowed by the many sequels and the huge run of found footage films that tried to cash in on the phenomenon. But Paranormal Activity, because of its sparseness and that found footage rawness, probably has come the closest to my nightmares than any other film, because the entire movie is about being watched. Being stalked, being prey, being toyed with just to watch you scream. And there's no reason why it's happening. This demon has just chosen this woman. The events in the movie aren't huge, they're small. And it's the small things that terrify you in real life. That door you know you closed, that noise downstairs. Was that footsteps? The small things are the things that have you questioning your sanity as they start to pile up. Things you can't speak of to another human being for fear that they'll think you're nuts, or saying it out loud might drive you nuts. The static camera at night has our eyes watching every corner of the frame. Our ears are keenly listening for any sound. That's exactly how I used to sit in bed at night as a child. And we watch helplessly while the lights in the hallway go on while the vulnerable couple is asleep in bed. We are cursed with demon vision and unable to help. But the truly frightening moment for me is when the movie breaks from its pattern. The movie had created a pattern of daytime being safe and nighttime being the time of demonic attacks. This creates a lot of dread while you anticipate nightfall. And then the demon attacks during the day. The couple is in the hallway and they see that a picture's fallen from the wall. The picture is gashed with what looks like claw marks. Suddenly the woman gasps, eyes wide. She squeaks out the words, "It's here with us right now." And we see her hair getting pulled up by something invisible. Is hysteria a form of possession? Can a suggestion enter another person's mind and pollute it, take it over? Can a well-intended lie cause more damage than protection? Back to when I was a child, my mother would go visit other women to preach the good word and try to convert them. She would take me along. I'd be dressed in a suit and tie, and I'd get plopped in front of this woman's children while the women chatted at the kitchen table. There was one particular woman, a single mother, who lived in a trailer in the country. She was a nice, normal-looking, middle-aged woman. She had a raspy voice from too many cigarettes, and I loved her laugh because of it. And my mom was always better after she'd do Bible study with this woman. She'd be happy, and things perked up around the house. I'm pretty sure my mom felt she had brought another woman to the fold and found herself a new friend. And then one day, we got a phone call. My mom answers the phone, and she's stammering. Whoever is on the other end is doing all the talking, and she's trying to ask questions, and she's getting nowhere. She hangs up the phone and looks at me. She's frightened. Get dressed and get in the car. We drive on the long road to this woman's trailer. There are cars and pickup trucks parked outside. My mother clutches me and her Bible very closely as we head to the trailer. I can hear the wailing before we get there, and now I'm scared. When we get in there, we see my mom's new friend. She is unwashed, and her hair is greasy strands. Her eyes are bloodshot from crying. She's dressed in a dirty nightgown. The kitchen table is covered with cigarette butts. There's a mound where the ashtray sits. The trailer stinks. And she is wailing and slapping the side of her head, and she keeps saying the same thing over and over. I am bruised on the head. I am bruised on the head. I am bruised on the head. She's quoting scripture from Genesis, where Jesus steps on the head of a serpent, which is supposed to be Satan. He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel. I'm suddenly aware of all the other people in the room. It's her family, and they look like they want to kill my mother. They aren't thinking about demons at all. Her brother, a very big man, gets in my mom's face. You fix this. I don't know how long we were there or what my mother said to this woman. In the end, I don't think she fixed it. Of course, we were banned from ever coming back. And this is when I got blessed with the gift of doubt. So I had this rare but recurring nightmare through my 20s and into my 30s. In the dream, I'd be in my apartment. It'd be very welcoming, very bright. It's nighttime and the curtains are drawn and I'm listening to records on my old stereo. And suddenly the light in the room changes somehow. It's darker. The turntable starts to slow down. I get this chill and I get up and walk towards the stereo to see what's wrong. And suddenly the couch kicks to the side like something just jumped out from behind it. The comforter that was draped over the top of the couch shoots off and covers me like a net. I feel the force of a big, powerful body hitting me and pushing me to the floor. I hear a horrible growl. And then I feel breath next to my ear. And then there's a loud, cruel laugh. And in that laugh carries a thought that goes through my mind. I've been wrong all this time. Everything I've believed is wrong. This demon has been watching me, waiting for me, finding that perfect time to crush my heart and my mind. I've been a fool, and now I'm captured prey. But I wake up every time to find everything as it should be. It's so silly, really. I don't believe in this stuff. I don't. Really. Thanks for listening to my show. I'd love to hear back from you. You can email me directly at scott@hellbentforhorror.com. For you, the listeners of Hellbent for Horror, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/hellbentforhorror. If you like the show and you're curious about audiobooks, sign up for the service through Hellbent for Horror. It helps make this podcast sustainable for me, and I thank you in advance. And thanks for listening. Hellbent for Horror was written and broadcast by me, S.A. Bradley, and produced by me and Lisa Gorski. If you like the show, please consider writing a review on iTunes or Google Play. It really helps. Thanks a lot for listening. You can now subscribe to the Hellbent for Horror podcast. It's now available on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. You can also keep up with Hellbent for Horror on iTunes at iTunes Podcast. That's on Twitter. You can find more on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Hellbent for Horror, and I'm on Twitter at Hellbent Horror. You can also find more info on my website, hellbentforhorror.com. Till next time, stay hellbent.